Hello everybody and welcome to another video. Sorry it's been a while since I last uploaded. I've had a few things going on. I had a second vaccination at the beginning of this week which made me feel rather unwell for a few days. So I wasn't really feeling up to doing videos at that point, and I've had a couple of other distractions that have sort of sidetracked me. So anyway, we're back today and we're going to be revisiting a band called Motanka. Now I covered this band back in January, I think it was, where I looked at a track of theirs called Oj to moje zemlje. Yeah. Now, when I did that track, I mentioned I had a few tracks by this band suggested, and one of them being Oj to moje zemlje, and another one being called Verba. I never actually specified that was the other track, but the track Verba was one that had been covered by many other reactors. So I went for the other one, which is why I did Oj to moje zemlje. But, you know, I've had this track suggested to me a lot, this track, Verba, which is what we're going to be looking at today. Now, I did a lot of research on the song. There's quite a powerful story behind it. The actual title of the track, Verba, as I understand it, means willow or willow tree. I do have a translation of the lyrics here. I'm not sure how accurate it's going to be. Now, because when I did Oj to moje zemlje, there was an actual translation of the lyrics under the video on YouTube. This one didn't have a translation, but I did find one. Looking at it, it seems to make perfect sense. When I actually put the lyrics through Google Translate just to sort of compare, the lyrics seemed very similar to what came through there. So from what I understand, the lyrics are accurate, but if they're not, I do apologise. You know, I did my best to try and find them. So yeah, we're going to be looking at this track Verba by Motanka. I've covered them once before, as I said before. I think they refer to themselves as mystical metal. You know, it had like some folk elements to it. They did say that they were more metal, or in the research I did, they said they were more metal than they seemed to be in the track that I checked out. So it's possible that this track might be quite different. It might be exactly the same. I don't know. I'm just waffling and talking absolute rubbish now, so we'll jump into this track and see what we have. As far as I know, it is quite a long track. It's a little bit over 7 minutes, I understand. So we'll jump into this track, Verba by Motanka. Let's have a look. well, we'll stop that there because we don't need to see that bit. But that is a powerful piece of music. I mean, once you actually find out the actual meaning behind that song and you see that video, it is incredibly powerful. Some of the imagery used in that video, it's just, it's kind of scary, but not in the way you'd think. Very, very powerful. Even the actual performance of the song, the music, the vocal performance is very, very powerful, and you can tell that there's a lot of emotion in that piece of music. There's a lot of emotion in those vocals, you know, in the actual performance. It's an impressive piece of music. And like I said, before I even started listening to the track, I said that when I read up on Motanka, they said that they were like mystic metal, and you know, then when I listened to Oitaimoya Zemle, there wasn't actually much of a metal element to that track. It was more sort of piece of folk music. This one has a lot more metal elements to it. You know, the track overall is a lot heavier, both emotionally and musically. And I even said in Oitaimoya Zemle that I thought they sort of leaned towards a sort of prog metal sort of sound, which again comes through in this track, but not that twiddly fretwanky sort of prog. You know, the good kind of prog. But yeah, a much heavier track musically. The subject matter, as I said, is quite powerful. I'll get to that in a minute. But we'll talk about the actual lyrics of the track. Like I said, I've got a translation here. I'm not sure how accurate it actually is, but from what I discovered, it seems to be fairly close. So, like I said, the track Verba means willow or willow tree. And the song goes, a lonely willow tree stays in the field. It is bended over above the river. It lets its branches hang down. It cries and fights. Our language is like one of a nightingale, and our land is the one and only. Willow tree, a lonely willow tree is bended. A lonely willow tree, lonely. Our souls are flying nearby, they are praising their land. Its branches are waving in the wind, they are sprouts, you and me. Our language is like one of a nightingale, our land is the one and only. Willow tree, a lonely willow tree, is bended. A lonely willow tree, lonely. Now that's the translation that I've got, and like I said, I don't know how accurate it is, but there's a couple of lines in there like, our language is like one of a nightingale, so you know, they think their language is beautiful and song-like, so they have a deep love for their language. Our land is the one and only, so they take great pride and have much love for their own land. And there's a couple of lines there as well. Our souls are flying nearby, they are praising their land. So, you know, our souls are flying nearby. You know, we encapsulate this land. You know, we are this land. And we will always be a part of this land. Now, the actual song itself, it's not obvious from the lyrics. The video does give some evidence of what the song's about, but again, if you didn't know the context, you might not be 100% sure what's going on. Now, this song is about something referred to as the Holodomor. I'm probably pronounced that horribly, and it's something that happened in the Ukraine between 1932 and 1933, and it was basically it was an artificial famine. That was imposed upon the country. Now, if I remember correctly, Holod means hunger, and Mor means extinction. So Holodomor basically means hunger extinction. You know, a forced hunger, famine, etc. And it was an artificial famine that was basically forced upon the country of Ukraine by the Soviet regime to suppress the Ukrainian people. And the early estimates of the deaths told by scholars and government officials varied hugely. Like, the official announced death toll was something like 2.4 million people, which is quite a lot. But according to other estimates, there was 12 million. Others said there was somewhere around about 7 to 10 million. 7 to 10 million. That's still, quite a broad spectrum of. Others say it was between 3.3 to 7.5, which again is still a very broad spectrum of a guess. And, it's still in the millions. All these people lost their life because of this imposed and enforced famine by the Soviet regime to try and suppress and control the Ukrainian people. And from what I understand, from what I read, some people even turned to cannibalism during this time. And that's just shocking. And according to the findings of a court of appeal of Kiev in 2010, the demographic losses due to the famine amounted to about 10 million, with 3.9 million direct deaths directly linked to the famine, and a further 6.1 million from birth defects as a cause of the famine. And the people who actually survived the horror and opposed the Soviet regime were then later killed in a big purge in 1937. So all these people that fought hard to survive through this enforced famine were then murdered by the Soviet government anyway. So this was a really horrible time for the Ukraine. It was horrible. Somewhere roughly around 12 million people died from a forced famine just because some fascist government wanted to take control of these people, wanted to suppress these people, wanted to say, look, I am your boss, you're my bitch now, and you will do as I say. I'm going to starve you to death unless you do what I say. It's quite a traumatic situation. And there was shots in that video of all those people crawling across the ground following this guy who appeared to have what appeared to be a loaf of bread wrapped up in chains, and he's dragging it behind himself, and there's all these people crawling along the ground just after this one loaf of bread, even though it's being dragged through dirt. They didn't care. They were going to eat it regardless because these people were starving, and they showed the mass graves of people just being pushed in there, so it was quite a horrific time. Very powerful imagery and a very powerful song, but again, a beautiful piece of music. It sounded amazing, and like I said, it was pretty heavy. It was much heavier than Oi to Moje Zemlje. So, what a powerful piece of music. And I've always said I like songs that have meanings and stories and that behind it, and this is quite a powerful one, and this is one that obviously these people feel very strongly and very passionately about, and it comes through in the music, in the performance. And it's it's something I'd never heard of this until I did the research for this track. A couple of people mentioned when they suggested this track, whenever it was, people mentioned small bits about it, about it being a famine in this period of time, but I didn't actually know the details of it until I actually did the research for this video. I'd never heard of it, so this is one of those things that you never taught this in school. You go to school and you learn history, but you're never told about things like this. You hear about things like the Holocaust, and again, another major tragedy of our time, another horrific time period. But why aren't we taught about things like this as well? Instead of, hearing about all this rubbish that no one really cares about, like how many wives Henry VIII had and how he killed them. No one cares about that. That's not important. This sort of thing is the thing we should be learning about. This is the sort of thing we should know about, so these things don't get repeated, so we can actively stop this sort of thing from ever happening again. These are important times of mass tragedy, of great suffering, and we're not being taught these in school. The way history is taught in school is very, very selective. Every country teaches only certain things that make them look good or them look important. Like, from what I understand, in Germany, they very rarely, if ever, talk about like the Holocaust, the Nazis, and stuff like that. They very rarely talk about that, from what I understand. And in places like in Japan, they won't teach something that makes their country look bad. In Korea, well, Korea is a very a very suppressed country as it is. Well, North Korea, is it North Korea that's the really suppressed one? Anyway, you know what I mean. We don't get taught these things, but these are the important things we need to know so that we can stop them from happening again, and so we don't repeat past mistakes. So yeah, it's important that more people know about these sorts of things, and it's quite powerful and quite shocking, to say the least. I mean, those images that were used in the video, I couldn't understand what the lyrics were, but you could feel it through the music, through the visuals of that track. You could feel the shock and the horror, once you know actually what the song is about. Even without understanding the words, you can still feel that power, the strength of the emotion coming through that song. Very, very powerful. And this is one of the great things about music. It has such a great way of connecting emotionally to you. Even if you can't understand what's being said, you can still feel the emotion being portrayed through that piece of music. And it's amazing. And that was a great piece of music. I really want to listen to more of their music. I'm going to have to find some and buy some of their albums or something like that, because Oito Moje Zemlje, I really enjoyed the track. This track, again, I really liked it. It's so powerful. It was really heavy where it needed to be. In other places, it was quiet. It was soft. And like I said, you could feel how powerful and how much these artists felt about this piece of work. Amazing. Absolutely amazing. But I don't know what else to say about that without repeating myself over and over again, which I've already been doing anyway. So I'm going to leave that as it is. Now, if anybody would like to suggest a track for me to react to, then please do so by all means. You can drop a comment in the comment section below, or message me on my Facebook or my Instagram, or you could even message me through my Patreon, where you could also help to support this channel, which would of course be a massive help to me, since every piece of content I create for this channel gets immediately demonetized, which is a little bit annoying, but what can you do? There's an option in Patreon where you can get your suggestion jumped to the front of the queue, should you so desire it. And there's a limit on how frequently you can do that, which is, it's limited to once a month, and that's just to be fair to other people who suggest tracks through YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram comments, to give them a chance to get their tracks looked at, because, if you could suggest as many as you wanted all the time, they wouldn't get a look in, and it would be a little bit unfair. But their option is there if you should so desire it. Completely forgotten where I was at though. If you do suggest a track through those more regular means, such as YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram comments, do know that it could take me a while to get around to your suggestion, because I do get suggested so many new tracks every single day that my list grows faster than I can actually record the videos. But I do write down every suggestion I get, so it should get done eventually. It just might take me a while to get around to it, unfortunately. Also, MetalHead Reacts is a proud supporter of the Sophie Lancaster Foundation, a British-based charity whose goal is to put an end to hate crimes. And one of the major facets of that is hate crimes against people of the alternative community. And that's something I believe in very, very strongly, something I'm very, very passionate about, because it's something I've had to deal with for most of my life, as have many of my friends and family. But it's also something that gets very widely ignored and sort of brushed under the carpet, and, people pretend it doesn't happen. And that's something that really needs to change, because every day all around the world, people from the alternative community are getting violently and brutally attacked just purely for the fact that they listen to alternative music and wear alternative fashion. Every single day we hear about all these other hate crimes like sexism, racism, homophobia, transphobia, religious hatred, ableism, etc. We hear about these every single day. from the most heinous and violent of these crimes where someone is murdered because of the colour of their skin, because of their sexual identity, or because of their religious beliefs, down to the most petty and pathetic of these crimes where some entitled white woman is calling the police because a family of colour are having a picnic in a public space. You know, we hear these on a daily basis in every facet of the media. But when it comes to somebody from the alternative community getting violently and brutally attacked, we don't hear a thing. You know, I'm not just talking about insults being shouted across the street. I'm not talking about things as, you know, like getting shoulder rammed as you're walking down the road. I'm talking about real violent crimes where people are getting brutally, violently beaten. People are getting hospitalised with broken limbs and sometimes even more life-threatening injuries over something as petty as their taste in music and their choice in clothing. But when these sorts of things happen, we don't hear a thing. The last time there was any widespread conversation about this was about 14 to 15 years ago, when Sophie Lancaster and her boyfriend Rob Maltby were violently and brutally attacked by a group of 5 or 6 people who beat them, kicked them, punched them, knocked them to the ground and stamped on their heads so violently that they both ended up in comas. Now, when this happened, Rob Maltby, he thankfully survived. He was in a coma for around about a week and a half, maybe a bit longer, I can't remember exactly. But he thankfully survived. Sophie Lancaster, on the other hand, she was in a coma for 13 days before she succumbed to her injuries and she died. This young woman, she was 20 years old and was violently beaten to death by a group of people just because of the clothes that she was wearing and the music that she listened to, because they didn't like the fact that she listened to that sort of thing. You know, they don't take into consideration any other factors. For example, Sophie Lancaster was a massive fan of Harry Potter, as are a vast majority of people, you know, in the country, around the world even. You know, it is a huge phenomenon for some reason. I can't stand it, but that's not the point. You know, they didn't take that into consideration. All they concentrated on was the fact that she was wearing different clothing and listened to different music. That's all the excuse that they needed for themselves to violently and brutally attack them and essentially murder her. Now, when this happened, this was all over the news, as rightfully it should have been. And, you know, over time, you know, it sort of faded into the background as other news stories came in, which is fair enough. But the thing is, in the 14 to 15 years since that's happened, we've not heard anything else similar. But I know for a fact there have been several hundred, if not several thousand, similar violent acts towards people from the alternative community. And we've not heard a thing about it. Just a couple of years ago, a young woman in Glasgow, Scotland, was again violently and brutally assaulted by a group, again, of 5 or 6 people. She was beaten violently and brutally twice on the same night within a matter of minutes of each other. Now, this wasn't mentioned on the news. This wasn't in the newspapers. This wasn't all over Facebook. This didn't come up on, like, Google News or what have you. You know, there was nothing said about it. Not a word. The only reason I found out about it is because a friend told me about it, and the only reason he knew about it was because he was friends with the person who got violently assaulted. Not a word of this was on the news, even though this young woman was violently and brutally assaulted by a group of people. Now, if this had been racially motivated, if this had been homophobically motivated, you know, this would have been all over the news. They would have had no end of talking about it. But no, this was a violent and brutal attack motivated purely for the fact that she listened to alternative music and wore alternative clothing. Not a word. Nothing was said. Now, if that violent assault had ended with her death, you can then guarantee that that would have been all over the news. And then people would have been crying and being sympathetic, going, oh, how can something like this happen? Oh, it's so tragic, it's so horrible, it's so bad. You know, how can this sort of thing happen? But she didn't die, so nobody cared. Nobody said a goddamn thing. And it's disgusting. We shouldn't have to wait for someone to lose their life before something gets done. We shouldn't have to wait for someone to die before we talk about this. And this is what the Sophie Lancaster Foundation is all about. They want to bring more attention to the fact that this is happening. They want to make people more aware of the fact that this sort of thing is going on. And they want to put a stop to it before another person dies. They don't want to see what happened to their daughter happen to anybody else. They don't want to see another family go through what they went through when they had to watch their daughter slowly die over the course of 2 weeks. Something has got to be done. It's got to stop. We can't keep ignoring it, because by ignoring it, we're essentially letting the people who commit these crimes think that they can get away with it. And that's not acceptable. If we carry on ignoring it, it's only a matter of time before what happened to Sophie Lancaster happens again. And we just simply can't allow that. Something's got to be done. So if you'd like to find out more about the Sophie Lancaster Foundation, there's a link to their website in the description below. You can go over there, find out what they're working on at the moment, find out what their overall goal is, because they can explain it a hell of a lot better than I can. And if you can help them out in any small way, obviously you don't feel obligated to do so, but if you can help them out in any small way, whether it be a small donation through their website or something as simple as one of these Sophie wristbands, you can get them off their web store. They've got these as well. They've got a whole bunch of other really cool stuff over there as well. But, you know, the smallest amount can make the biggest difference. And the sooner we get more people talking about this, the sooner we bring more attention to the fact that this is a very big, very real problem, the sooner we can help to stamp out prejudice, hatred, and intolerance everywhere. But I'm going to leave that as it is for the time being. Thank you all very, very much for watching, and I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.